The city of Alexandria, a landmark of Egyptian civilization, was the site of universal knowledge. Founded by Alexander the Great in 332 BC, it soon became the center of power and wealth under the Ptolemies, who built the city, the famous lighthouse, and the great library with its museum or research center. All the knowledge of antiquity and progress of human civilizations were recorded in the great library, the Bibliotheca Alexandrina. The international community and UNESCO recognized the uniqueness of this library for the ancient world and gave full support to the idea of revival of the Bibliotheca that was first advanced in 1974 at Alexandria University. To ensure to this project the international dimension it deserves, the new Bibliotheca Alexandrina will incorporate the latest technological facilities to meet the challenges of the 21st century. Usually, when we think of UNESCO, we think of projects to save historical sites. The Nubian campaign, launched in 1960, saved temples like Abu Simbel, Wadi Subua, Kalabsha, Philae, and many others, threatened by permanent submersion beneath the waters of the Lake Nasser. This time, UNESCO has mobilized funds and efforts not to save a monument, but to revive an idea relevant not only to Egypt, but to all humanity. At the Aswan meeting held in October 1990, 5 million Egyptian pounds, the equivalent of 1.5 million US dollars, were allocated by the Egyptian government for this project, and 64 million US dollars from the international community. On a less spectacular scale, associations in the UK, Spain, Mexico, Greece, and the United States show their interest in the project by contributing money, books, and moral support.
I think it's inspiring to consider the building of a library at the end of this century, at the end of this millennium, that takes its purpose from the ancient spirit of the ecumenical, universal collection of knowledge to be made available to everyone. We have to translate that idea into modern terms, but that is, I feel, the immediate inspiration. The second thing is that the Middle East is a very critical area. Too often I feel it is associated with conflict and with problems, and this is a chance to work on a project that is positive and that is that brings people together instead of putting them apart. And for that reason, people in California who have heard about the project, whether they're librarians or just friends or readers or what, are all feeling the same way.
This is the site of the future Bibliotheca Alexandrina. It is within walking distance from the Faculty of Humanities, Law and Commerce. The Bibliotheca opens onto the Corniche. It will directly be linked by the Corniche to what is now Alexandria's greatest monument, the 15th century Mamluk fort of Khait Bey. For in this very site once stood the Pharos, that ancient lighthouse, considered one of the wonders of the world.
This site is almost about 10 acres. It's donated by the Egyptian government, including the Conference Center, for the revival of the ancient library of Alexandria project. In a region that has been suffering from unrest and misunderstanding for so long, it is the road for socio-economic development is to promote cultural development. The Library of Alexandria is the bridge toward that, not only serving Egypt, but the Mediterranean region and the Middle East and the world at large. So there's a great role, a great need for the library, not only to serve Alexandria and Egypt, but also Mediterranean at large. It is a window from Egypt and Africa toward the north, toward the Europe and beyond, toward the rest of the world.
The Egyptian government, UNESCO, and the UNDP launched an international competition to design the new library. First prize for the design was awarded to the Norwegian team of architects in the fall of 1989. Architect Thorsen is one of the 5-member team. He explains the various concepts that were the key to the $115 million new structure, and if it's in any way related to the one destroyed more than 2,000 years ago.
Nobody knows what it looked like. Nobody knows what the actual design of the library was like. There are some indications that it might have looked like the other libraries in the Mediterranean region at that time, but that felt very strongly that the design should be a new design, actually portraying more the actual recreation of something that has, bothered mankind throughout quite some few decades, and trying to find a different and symbolic context to the library design itself. Now, if you think about the circular shape of the library itself, that also again portrays maybe some of the ancient symbols that we could use and could see. It is the sun itself, the circular one. It could also be the moon. The circular shape also is related to the urban space which this particular site is set within.
During site preparations, archaeologists discovered pieces of mosaics, pottery, fragments of marble, and a head believed to be that of King Ptolemy III. The need to preserve knowledge and record experience is very ancient and deep-rooted, and from the dawn of civilization, man has responded to this need. He carved stone to record scenes from his daily life, hunting games, accounts of war, and poetry. He used clay and animal skin too. He worked precious metals by methods unsurpassed to this day. He carved wood and manufactured paper out of stems of a plant by ingenious methods for the love of writing and preserving. The pharaohs held books in great esteem and advised their young. Copy your fathers, your ancestors. See their words endure in books. Open, read them, copy the knowledge. He who is taught becomes wise. Make your memorial last through wisdom. Life on earth is not too long. Happy is he who is remembered. As the complexity of civilizations grew, so did the forms of libraries evolve into what we know today. Among the many libraries known in antiquity, what makes this great library of Alexandria so special? Its large collection of manuscripts, or its unique location at the crossroads of 3 continents, Africa, Asia, and Europe? Dr. Abbedi, author of The Life and Fate of the Ancient Library of Alexandria, explains.
With Alexander the Great, there was a turning point in the history of mankind. For the first time, one kingdom, or one state, stretched over the 3 continents known in ancient times, Europe, Asia, and Africa. With this creation of a world empire or a world state, political barriers were removed, and with it, cultural barrier also. And for the first time, there was a concept of the earth. And there was a mixing of cultures and knowledge of distant societies that existed, that had different traditions and beliefs and cults from those known in the Middle East or in the Mediterranean area. With this development, knowledge became universal. And when knowledge became universal, a universal library was required. Before Alexandria, which was founded by Alexander the Great, knowledge was regional. So Egyptian libraries, Syrian, Babylonian, Greek or Syrian libraries were concerned with local traditions and local histories and local cults. But with this new situation of a world state, there was need for a universal library. And the response took the form of the Library of Alexandria. It was founded by King Ptolemy I, the immediate successor of Alexander the Great. And by tradition, this was the greatest library in all antiquity. And scholars flocked from everywhere in the Mediterranean and Middle East to proceed and follow the researches within the precincts of the great library in Alexandria. There was an interaction between ancient Egyptian learning and the Greek knowledge. Ancient Egypt was the first country to invent in the 16th century BC, that is 1530, a man called Amenemhat invented a water clock to measure time by night. This invention of a water clock was worked upon by Alexandrian scholars, and an improvement was made. So we can really trace the interaction in Alexandria between the new Greek mind working on what is inherited from ancient Egypt. This is a unique situation in ancient human experience.
For more than 300 years, scholars flocked from every corner of the Mediterranean to study, translate, analyze, and discover. All this led to the progress of human society and culture.
The creation of a universal library had its immediate rewards and results in the creation of a tremendous scientific movement. New sciences developed. The science of philology started for the first time. Scientific geography was created in that period, in the 3rd century BC. The number of books multiplied at very great rate, that within half a century the original building grew small, could not accommodate all the accumulated books. Therefore a daughter library, a branch was created, and in the ancient Egyptian tradition attached to the main temple, inward in the place where Pompey's Pillar stands at nowadays. The Serapeum, where we stand now, being the largest and greatest Egyptian temple in the city and elsewhere, a library was included, and that library was part of the main library of Alexandria. And when the great royal library was destroyed in 48 BC, this library became the principal support for intellectual life in the city.
Recent archaeological discoveries in the heart of modern Alexandria today are a living proof of the intense intellectual activities that were part of the everyday life of the city during the time of the Great Library.
We are here in one of the recent and most exciting buildings recently discovered in Alexandria. As it looks, it has been identified as a lecture room, and it's one of a complex. There are perhaps 8 or 9. Some are demolished and some are very well preserved, like this one. And this survived to the 6th century AD. And it seemed that there was a very advanced educational center in this area of Bibliotheca, very close to the bath complex and to the so-called Roman theater behind us in this direction. And this is unique. Lecture rooms are never discovered in other archaeological sites. So this is an extremely interesting and valuable discovery for the cultural history of Alexandria.
The fate of the library remains a mystery to this very day. and many theories explain its ending.
What happened to these masses upon masses of books or papyrus rolls that were amassed in the two buildings, the Royal Library and the daughter library in the Serapeum? The end of these two institutions coincided with two different events. The first, the Royal Library, faced destruction unintentionally during a war that took place in the year 48 BC, when Julius Caesar, came to Alexandria and had to fight a war in support of Cleopatra against her brother Ptolemy III. After 391 AD, there was no mention of a library in Alexandria. The Arabs came and occupied the whole of Egypt and Alexandria. The events of the conquest were recorded by Arab historians, by Coptic historians, and by Byzantine historians. There was no mention of an event connected with any collection of books for almost 600 years, until the end of 6th century of Hijrah or 12th century AD. And then only a story crops up in the writings of Arab historians that when Amr conquered Alexandria, there was this library, and that on command of the Caliph Omar, he set fire to it. This story has been disputed and rejected ever since the 18th century in Europe. And one of the greatest historians who rejected it as fabrication was Edward Gibbon, who studied the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. Nowadays, the dispute about whether this event ever took place has died out, and the majority of serious scholars believe that there was no library in Alexandria, or to speak of, existed when the Arabs came to Alexandria. So it was a medieval creation, and very probably a byproduct of the Crusades.
But now, the issue at hand is of a practical nature. Experts from all over the world met here at the conference center in a symposium to discuss the intellectual content of the Bibliotheca Alexandrina.
The priorities, for example, we are talking about what collection should be acquired in the library. This is supposed to be a library that serves scholars nationwide or worldwide. So basically we are talking about collection, for example, in the arts, all branches of the humanities, religion, comparative religion, because basically Alexandria has been a center where all the three major religions coexisted together, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. We are talking about architecture, we're talking about the history of the Mediterranean region, we're talking about the merging of the civilizations, East and West.
We are not building a national library, we are not building a library of Congress, we are not building a British museum, but we are building a unique library to Alexandria. That's what I feel about the content, which should be identical, restricted to Alexandria itself, not diffused to other collections and to other disciplines all over the world. Because actually our resources are limited. And if we actually capitalize on our limited resources, we could actually have a distinctive library in this way.
About the archaeological field and the context of the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, I suggest 3 points. The first one, a catalog, informatic catalog of the publication of this century in Europe, in America, in every world, about Egyptian, Greco-Roman, Coptic and Islamic bibliography. Second point, another database or informatic catalog of the monuments of Egypt, architectural, sculptural monuments like that in the Museum of Egypt. Point 3, a database or informatic catalog of the Egyptian finds collected in the Museum of Europe and America. And I mean that this work is very interesting and completely new in the world of archaeology, and very important for the development of the archaeological field of the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, and very important also for the young generation of Egyptian nation.
I think really we should get deep into recording our history and our cultural heritage using this media as much as we can, because I always consider that our cultural heritage is the petroleum that we really have for a long time, because any other type of petroleum, for example, it will finish after a few years, but our cultural heritage is staying forever and ever, and preserving it is preserving one of our assets that we have in our country for a long, long time.
The impact of technological breakthroughs on culture is similar today to when electricity was first introduced. These technical innovations and their applications, still unforeseen at present, will fashion and improve the quality of our cultural experience.
We can turn the Bibliotheca Alexandrina into a center for acquiring information, as well as a center for providing information, particularly about Egypt and the Mediterranean region, which seems to be the area in which the Bibliotheca Alexandrina is supposed to be specialized in. This will be in keeping with what we call the virtual library, or a library without walls. It means that you do not have to come to a library to search for the valuable information that's being stored. You can easily search the Bibliotheca Alexandrina collection by being in a place in the United States or in Europe.
Alexandria Library came just in time, whereby everybody is talking about virtual library or electronic library, whereby all the users of the library will not go and pick up books from the shelves, but instead of that, they will have their own computer on which they have all the information accessible to them without picking any book from shelves. So we think that Alexandria Library should plan to have its electronic collection beside the physical collection of selected books and other materials.
What we need is to develop an information infrastructure for Egypt that would enable Egyptian universities and research centers and libraries like the Bibliotheca Alexandrina to link to what I consider to be the global digital highway. This means that we have to provide facilities such as fast computers, number one. We have to provide better telecommunication facilities such as fiber optics, which are capable of carrying enormous amount of data besides images and motion and many other things that are made available through the multimedia, which is a new concept that has been developed worldwide.
We have what we call optical discs, and especially the laser discs. On these laser discs, they are just similar to the compact discs or the CDs that are using for recording music. So we use the same technology in order to store the information in the form of text and images and video and sound on the same kind of disk. So the availability of these disks in the 90s made the life much easier for technology recording.
We have to make sure that the infrastructure is in place, and then we have to make sure that people are trained, and then I think basically we can join the ranks of other advanced countries who are using the digital information superhighway, otherwise referred to as the internet.
While architects are busy completing the drawings and experts exchange views on strategies, the library service department is taking shape. Head of the training center, Mrs. Layla Abdelhadi, is in charge of personnel training.
When the books are processed and catalogued, they go to the different electronic units and they are recorded on the computer. So we are creating a database for the catalog of the library of all the books and resources that arrive. There is here the Arabic unit. They are recording the Arabic books. And over there they are recording the English books. Of course, all the people who are working here are graduates of different faculties. Some of them are library science and others are different graduates. And this is what we really want, because we want to build up subject specialists to be able to serve the public in the future in their own specialty. They are now on a training, on-the-job training in the different sections, and we hope eventually we create an organized training program we want to have our staff ready for in the future library. And these training courses will follow up, and we hope to get scholarships from other countries in the world so that people get really good training to start working in '98 when the library is open.
In a region lacking in library facilities of this caliber, re-establishing the Great Library at Alexandria is not simply a nostalgia of past glories. It is a chance for Alexandria, Egypt, and the Middle East to connect and integrate the assets of a long cultural past into the future.